I was an orphan, and the Liu family had taken me in and raised me. When the elders of the Liu family suggested that I marry into their family and take Willow as my wife, they also made it clear that any children we had would carry the Liu surname. I had been deeply in love with Willow for as long as I could remember. And besides, Liu father and Liu mother had raised me after I lost my parents. I considered them my family, so I agreed without hesitation. I married Willow, but after we were married, something strange happened. Willow didn't get pregnant for a very long time. My mother-in-law became furious. She blamed me for everything. She forbade me from drinking alcohol or eating meat. She wouldn't even let me stay up late or play video games. I followed every rule she gave me, but nothing changed. No matter what I did, I still couldn't meet her expectations. Confused and desperate, my mother-in-law started making me drink goji berry tea and take ginseng. She even ordered me to kneel down and pray to Buddha every single day. What she didn't know was the truth. After all those years of marriage, Willow had never even allowed me to touch her. Not once. Then one day, I became so exhausted that I ended up lying in a hospital bed. Even then, my wife Willow never came to see me. Not even once. Instead, it was Makoto who came to see me. He looked at me with a strange mixture of pity and embarrassment before quietly telling me that he and Willow were preparing for their wedding, so they couldn't come to see me. That was the moment everything finally became clear. Willow had another family outside our marriage, and after everything I had sacrificed for her, I was the only one left alone. Then I opened my eyes again. I was back at the Liu family home. Willow's mother was standing in front of me, smiling as if nothing had ever happened. She looked at me and casually asked, "George, do you like our Willow?" I stared at her. Then I answered with a single word. No. In this life, I was going to do what I truly wanted. Chapter 1. The sharp smell of hospital disinfectant still lingered at the tip of my nose. The pain was still fresh in my mind. Standing in front of me was Willow's mother, my former mother-in-law from my previous life. She was asking the exact same question again. "George, do you like our Willow? After graduation, would you want Willow to be your wife?" The Liu family was gathered in the living room, along with several old friends of my parents. Liu mother spoke with warmth and affection. Her voice was gentle, almost loving. It was completely different from the fierce and difficult woman I remembered from my previous life. In my previous life, because Willow and I had spent so little time together after our marriage, she never became pregnant. My mother-in-law blamed me for it. She came up with every possible way to make my life miserable. She restricted my diet, forbade me from eating meat or drinking alcohol, forced me to take traditional medicine every day, and even made me kneel down and pray to gods and Buddha. But that wasn't even the worst of it. What truly suffocated me were her constant sarcastic remarks. She would repeatedly question whether I was even a man and whether I was capable of being a husband at all. Once, she pushed me so far that I nearly raised my hand against her. But the moment I did, she cried out desperately and reminded me of everything she had supposedly done for me. She said she had raised me when I was only an orphan. She said that if she hadn't taken me in, I would have starved to death on the streets. She reminded me that she had treated me like her own son and had even entrusted her precious daughter to me. According to her, all of that was an enormous kindness. Yet, in return, I had supposedly repaid her with ingratitude and didn't know how to appreciate what I had been given. That had always been my weakness. Because of those words, I never actually laid a hand on her. Now, as I slowly came back to my senses, Liu mother noticed that I was distracted. "George, stop zoning out. If you have something to say, just say it." She gently pushed my shoulder. I looked back into her eyes. There was something hidden behind that warm smile. Urgency. She was desperately trying to get Willow and me together. If the old me had paid closer attention, I might have realized what that urgency really meant. She wasn't rushing to unite two people who loved each other. She was thinking about my inheritance. She wanted Willow and me married so that the Liu family could eventually gain access to the wealth under my name. Even her obsession with us having a child later had the same purpose. Back then, I was nothing more than a pampered rich heir who had just lost his parents. I was devastated. I thought I had finally found a family in the Liu household. I thought I had found somewhere I belonged. How could I have suspected that they had another reason for taking me in? But now, after living through more than 30 years of a loveless marriage and experiencing the true nature of Lou Mother firsthand, I could finally see everything clearly. So I stood up. I smiled politely and said, "Madam, I think you've misunderstood. I only see Willow as a sister. After high school, I plan to attend university." Chapter 2. The moment I said that, Lou Mother's face suddenly turned pale. Her expression changed so quickly that anyone paying attention could see it. Her question in front of everyone, asking whether I liked Willow, had never been an innocent question. She wanted me to publicly confirm that I intended to marry Willow. Once that happened, she would have a perfect reason to push me into spending the wealth under my name on the Lou family. And no one could criticize her for it. After all, I would supposedly be spending money for my future wife's family. But Lou Mother recovered quickly. She stood up, walked over, and naturally took my hand. Then she smiled at everyone and said, "This child is just too shy. Willow, why don't you take George for a walk in the garden?" Willow was sitting directly across from me on the sofa. She was young, beautiful, and slightly aloof. She wore a light beige polka-dot dress that fell just below her calves. The dress looked simple and natural, while the matching ribbon around her waist accentuated her slim figure. Since Willow's father had been a close friend of my parents, Willow and I had grown up around each other. You could barely even call us childhood sweethearts. But when I was young, I had always loved being around her. Ever since I was little, I had always loved being around Willow. When we were children, we got along perfectly well. But as we grew older, she gradually became more distant. In my previous life, I never understood why. I simply assumed she had grown up and was becoming more conscious of the boundaries between men and women. I never imagined the real reason was much simpler. Willow was tired of me. Back then, I was a somewhat overbearing young master with a bad temper. But Willow had no choice. Her parents ordered her to listen to me, and even though she didn't like me, she couldn't simply get rid of me. Naturally, she became frustrated. If she had just ignored me, perhaps things would have been different. But instead, she married me. She married me, yet she never allowed me to touch her. She became my wife, yet she carried on an affair behind my back. I hated her. But more than that, I hated myself. I had been completely blinded by my feelings for her. And because of that, I ended up living a miserable life. I clenched my fists tightly before slowly relaxing them. Then I gently pulled my hand away from Lou Mother's grasp. Still wearing a faint smile, I said, "You don't need to accompany me, Willow. You're supposed to be seeing Makoto soon. Aren't you? If you like him, you should bring him home sooner." One of the guests immediately spoke up. "Willow already has someone she likes? Then why is your mother trying to match the two of you?" Only then did I look at Willow. Her expression was even worse than Lou Mother's. The corners of her eyes were slightly red. I couldn't be bothered to look at her any longer. I politely greeted everyone in the room and walked out by myself. Chapter 3. As soon as I left the living room, I headed straight for the mailbox in the front yard and began searching through the letters. After rummaging through them for a while, I finally found one addressed to me. "George." Willow's voice came from behind me. I turned around but quietly slipped the letter behind my back. She stared at me and asked, "Why did you say that today?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked upset. "You confessed to me yesterday, and today you're saying you only see me as a sister. Are you playing with me? My mom treats you like her own son, and you embarrassed her in front of everyone." I silently looked at her. Her words immediately reminded me of my previous life. After I married Willow, Lou Mother had never once missed an opportunity to make me lose face in front of other people. And whenever I showed even the slightest bit of displeasure, Willow would become angry with me. She used to say, "Hasn't my mom always treated you well? She's your elder. What's wrong with her saying a few words?" So now I simply gave her the same answer. I smiled. "Your mother treats me like her own son, but even her own son can be rebellious. What's wrong with saying a few things to her?" Willow bit her lip and remained silent for a moment. Then she quietly said, "You're acting strange." To her, I really was acting strange. After all, in my previous life, when my parents died, I had genuinely considered the Liu family my own. I had completely changed from the arrogant young man I once was. I didn't dare speak harshly to Liu mother. I was always careful around her, and I constantly tried to please Willow. I looked at Willow and gave a faint sneer. So what are you upset about now? Aren't you the one who hated me for chasing after you? Now that I've finally said I don't like you, exactly like you wanted, why are you upset? After saying that, I turned around and prepared to leave. But I still wanted to open the letter in my hand. Willow suddenly spoke again. I didn't. Chapter 4, it doesn't matter, I replied. It doesn't matter, Willow. Whether you love me or not, none of it means anything anymore. Willow frowned. Trying to say nice things isn't going to work, George. You're still so difficult to deal with. After my parents died, I had no one else to rely on. Because of that, Willow's attitude toward me had changed dramatically. In the past, she wouldn't have dared to raise her voice at me. But now, she openly called me difficult. Was I really difficult to deal with? No. I simply refused to follow her expectations anymore. Her so-called nice words were nothing more than attempts to keep me under control and eventually lure me into proposing to her. In my previous life, immediately after Willow and I became engaged, the Liu family came to me with an excuse. They claimed they needed money to expand their business. They convinced me to put up most of my assets and use my wealth to pave the way for the Liu family's future. It was a time when private businesses were beginning to flourish. Opportunities to make money were everywhere. With my financial support, the Liu family quickly expanded into the real estate and food industries in City A. Before long, they became the richest family in the area. For more than 30 years, everyone envied me. They thought I had married into a wealthy and powerful family. But no one knew the truth. Without me, George, the Liu family would never have reached those heights. Not even close. But this life would be different. This time, I would stand at the top and look down at the clowns of the Liu family. I would let them dance their foolish little dance. And then I would watch them destroy themselves. I couldn't be bothered to say anything more. I simply smiled and said, I'm difficult to deal with. So what? If you don't like it, deal with it. Chapter 5. Back in my room, I immediately tore open the letter. What I discovered inside left me stunned. I actually had an uncle. He shared the same father as my mother, although they had different mothers. And he was currently living in F country. I had met this uncle once before. Back then, he had come to our house seeking help because his elderly mother needed medical treatment. My parents had helped him financially and even introduced him to a good hospital. After that, our two families stayed in touch from time to time. But over the years, we gradually lost contact. In my previous life, I had no idea that my uncle had gone abroad to make a fortune. By sheer luck, he eventually became very wealthy. Unfortunately, he didn't learn about my parents' car accident and their deaths until an entire year had passed. When he finally discovered that I had been adopted by the Liu family, he immediately wrote to me. The letter was sent to my old home and eventually made its way to the Liu family's mailbox. Liu mother knew about that letter all along, but she deliberately kept it from me. She never mentioned it. It wasn't until many years later that I discovered the truth, that my uncle had been sending me letters and money the entire time. By then, however, it was already too late. After reading the letter, I learned that my uncle couldn't return to the country for some reason. So instead, he had chosen to stay in contact with me through letters. This was his 10th letter. The contents were similar to the previous ones. He told me about his life abroad, offered me words of comfort, and asked whether I was willing to go to F country and live with him. F country was a developed country with excellent universities, advanced education, and specialized programs. Inside the envelope were also 10 large foreign currency bills and a plane ticket to F country. My nose tingled as emotion rushed through me. How wonderful. I wasn't an orphan after all. I had family. The flight was scheduled to leave in 4 days from the neighboring South City. I took a deep breath and made up my mind. Before leaving, there was still something important I had to deal with, my parents' inheritance. I decided to leave the property untouched. Its location was excellent, and I believed it would appreciate in value over time. As for the money, I planned to divide it between 2 accounts. Half would be kept abroad, while the other half would remain safely in the bank. I also had to be careful. I barely knew my uncle, so before I contacted him or his family, I would make sure I had enough protection and that everything was safe. Chapter 6. Fortunately, the college entrance exams were already over. I used the excuse of going out to spend time with my classmates, which gave me the perfect opportunity to take care of everything I needed to handle. While I was at the bank, I unexpectedly ran into a few classmates. They immediately became excited when they saw me. "We were just looking for you. Come on, we're having a class reunion." The gathering was being held at the biggest KTV in the city. Back then, karaoke was still an incredibly popular way for young people to have fun. When I arrived, Willow was already there. One of my friends jokingly asked, "Why isn't George here today?" Another laughed. "Yeah, where's your husband?" Willow frowned and complained, "I'm so sick of seeing him, and I don't like George. I would never marry him." The entire room burst into laughter. Someone else immediately asked, "Then who do you like?" "Our class president." Everyone started teasing Willow and pushing her toward Makoto. The guys around me gave a few awkward coughs. The colorful lights flashed across the room. Only then did everyone notice that I had arrived. I walked over confidently and smiled. "What a lively atmosphere. Please don't let me interrupt. Continue." Willow instinctively moved closer to Makoto. Then she frowned at me. "George, what are you trying to pull now?" "Trying to pull something?" There was only one thing I wanted. I wanted to expose the two of them, but nothing had actually happened yet. If I suddenly told everyone that these two people had destroyed my life in my previous life, who would believe me? So I simply smiled and said, "Willow, if I'm really that annoying, then why did you always accept the gifts I gave you?" She immediately snapped back. "What? Taking your gifts doesn't mean I agreed to anything. You're really shameless." Before she could say anything else, I clapped my hands. "Fine. If I'm not welcome here, I'll leave." No one even had time to react. I had already pushed open the door and walked out. Willow quickly followed me. "George, listen to me." Then I heard someone behind me suddenly shout, "Makoto fainted." Willow immediately abandoned me. She hurriedly said, "George, that was just a slip of the tongue. I'll explain everything to you later, okay?" But before she could even finish speaking, she was already rushing back to Makoto's side. I looked at her coldly. Then I turned around and walked away without hesitation. There would be no explanation. There was no reason for one. In 3 days, I would be leaving for F country. From now on, I would never think about you again. And you shouldn't think about me either. Chapter 7. The next day, I began packing my room. Anything I didn't need was thrown away. While I was packing, Lou's mother came over and casually asked which university I planned to attend. Of course, I wasn't going to tell her that I was actually leaving the country to study. So I casually mentioned South City University just to get her off my back. Lou's mother immediately praised the university. Then, almost without warning, she shifted the conversation back to Willow and marriage. "You can get engaged first. It won't affect you and Willow going to university." Before I could even refuse, she quickly tried to reassure me. "I've already talked to Willow. She and that Makoto are just ordinary classmates. You're overthinking things." I was speechless. She still wasn't willing to let the matter go. I took a step back from Lou's mother and calmly said, "Madam, I truly have no interest in Willow." Lou's mother clearly didn't believe me. She quickly smiled and reassured me. "Good boy. I'll make sure Willow completely cuts ties with that classmate." Unfortunately, Willow overheard those words. She obviously didn't understand what had happened before she arrived, but she immediately walked over to us. Her eyes were filled with disappointment and disgust. She angrily looked at me and said, "Young master, does everyone have to revolve around you? Makoto is weak, and his family isn't well off. I've only been looking out for him a little. Why did you have to make it public? And why did you even report it to my mother?" As if she were venting all the frustration she had been holding inside, Willow angrily tugged at the bracelet around her wrist. The beads suddenly came loose. They scattered across the floor with a series of sharp little clicks, rolling in every direction and disappearing into corners and beneath furniture. Willow looked at me bitterly. I was actually going to apologize to you, but now it seems completely unnecessary. I'm telling you clearly, there's absolutely nothing between me and Makoto, and I won't distance myself from him just because of you. After letting out all her anger, Willow kicked the trash bin beside the door. The bin toppled over, spilling its contents across the floor. Figurines, scarves she had knitted herself, origami cranes, little paper stars. Everything rolled across the floor. Willow's eyes immediately turned red. She bit her lip and quietly said, "These were all gifts I gave you." I frowned. "If you don't like them, then throw them away." I kicked one of the beads that had rolled to my feet. To me, they were nothing but annoying little reminders. Chapter 8. In 2 days, I would board a flight to F country. The distance between a city and South City wasn't short, so I needed to leave for South City ahead of time. Fortunately, I had already prepared my passport because of a previous overseas trip. I didn't have many belongings with me. My valuables and property certificates had already been safely stored inside a bank safe deposit box. Lou father and Lou mother were both away on business in another city, so I didn't need to say goodbye to them personally. They had indeed taken care of me for many years, but now I knew the truth. Everything they had done was ultimately connected to my inheritance. Even the money my uncle had been sending me had been intercepted and kept by Lou mother. That money alone would have been enough to cover my living expenses for all those years. As I dragged my suitcase out of the house, I unexpectedly ran into Willow and Makoto in the lobby. It looked like they had just returned from somewhere. Willow immediately noticed the suitcase in my hand. "Where are you going? Are you going to report to my mom about me and Makoto again?" I motioned for the two of them to move aside. "Not interested. I'm just going to stay at a classmate's house. Madam already knows." That wasn't a lie. I had indeed told Lou mother that I would be staying at a classmate's house for a couple of days. Willow was still in a bad mood. She coldly said, "Go by yourself. Don't let the driver pick you up." "That's my family's driver, not yours." I didn't care enough to argue. Makoto, who had been silent until then, suddenly spoke in a humble and somewhat pitiful tone. "George, I was just kicked out by my family, and I have nowhere to go. Willow kindly offered to let me stay here. I heard from Madame that you and Willow had some unpleasantness because of me. I'm really sorry." Willow immediately snorted. "You don't need to apologize to him." She wrapped her arm around Makoto's and continued, "If it weren't for his big mouth, my mom wouldn't have bothered you in the first place." It was obvious. The two of them were completely in agreement. I found the whole thing meaningless. Without saying another word, I simply walked ahead. Behind me, Makoto continued speaking in his weak, gentle voice. "Willow, don't you want to go talk to George?" She coldly replied, "I don't need to bother with him. He's an orphan with nowhere else to go. Sooner or later, he'll come back." Her tone was firm, cold, and filled with disdain. I paused for a moment. Then I continued walking. So that's what they really thought. They believed I had nowhere else to go. They believed I had no family waiting for me. And because of that, they felt entitled to treat me however they wanted. It didn't matter. The next time we met, I would make sure they experienced exactly what it felt like to have nowhere to go. Chapter 9. On the first day after George left, Willow didn't feel anything unusual. But by the second day, she began to grow restless. She finally asked the housekeeper, "Has George still not come back?" The housekeeper shook his head. Willow's beautiful brows furrowed slightly. She complained irritably, "I can't stand him. Who does he think he is? What's so special about him? He acts as if he's some kind of rich young master." After venting her frustration, she turned back to the housekeeper. "Did George say he was going to stay at a classmate's house?" The housekeeper shook his head again. This time, Willow became even more irritated. A strange feeling began building inside her. It felt as if a heavy stone had settled on her chest, making it difficult for her to breathe. As she passed by George's room, something shiny caught her attention near the large-leaved plant beside the door. She suddenly realized what it was. Willow bent down and picked it up. It was a single bead from the bracelet. For a moment, she simply stared at it. Then, almost as if she couldn't stop herself, she crouched down and began searching the floor for the other beads. A deep sense of regret slowly rose inside her heart. Why had she pulled the bracelet apart? This was supposed to be George's graduation gift. She had carefully prepared it for him. She knew George could be arrogant and overbearing. But she also knew that after his parents died, he had gradually changed. He had become much calmer and more mature. She knew that. So why had she acted so willfully toward him? Why had she said all those things? Willow quietly thought to herself that when George returned, she would sincerely apologize to him. She would explain everything properly. But she waited one day, then 2, then 3, and George still didn't come home. Her anxiety eventually reached its peak. She started calling George's friends one after another. But every person gave her the same answer. They hadn't seen George. Willow refused to believe them. She went from one house to another, searching for him herself. But no matter where she looked, she couldn't find him. Finally, she returned home and opened the door to George's room. She froze. The room that had once felt warm and cozy was now strangely empty. All the stuffed animals she had given George over the years were gone. They were the same stuffed animals she had loved herself since childhood. And now every single one of them had disappeared. George's clothes and shoes were gone too. The room suddenly felt much emptier than before. Willow hurriedly searched through everything, desperately trying to find some trace that George had ever lived there. But the only thing she found was a letter tucked beneath a book on the desk. She picked it up and read, "I'm gone. Mr. and Mrs. Liu, please don't worry." Just a few simple words. But none of them were meant for Willow. Chapter 10. After the plane landed, I didn't immediately call my uncle using the contact information he had given me. Instead, I hired a detective to quietly look into my uncle's family situation. I didn't ask for anything too detailed. I simply wanted to know whether the family was harmonious, whether they got along with one another, and whether there were any serious problems. After all, I thought to myself, no family already drowning in chaos would willingly welcome a stranger who suddenly appeared claiming to be a relative. Fortunately, the information I received was reassuring. My uncle owned a large farm in one of the states. He had a fairly good reputation in the local community, and his family wasn't very large. More importantly, the family members seemed to get along well. Of course, I had also prepared for the worst. If my uncle turned out to be unreliable, I could still stay in F country and continue my studies on my own. It wouldn't be the end of the world. Once the investigation was complete, I bought gifts for everyone and finally contacted my uncle. The moment he learned that I had arrived, he immediately came to pick me up. 3 days later, I finally reached my uncle's farm. My uncle was more than 10 years older than my mother. He had spent much of his younger years mining for gold, and years of exposure to the harsh sun and strong winds had made him look considerably older than his actual age. He wasn't a very talkative man. Especially around me, he seemed unsure of what to say. He simply looked at me, sighed and said, "When I look at you, I think of your mother." Then he handed me a bank card and told me to spend the money however I wanted. He took me around the farm, taught me how to ride horses, and even let me play with the enormous dog he kept there. The dog, however, didn't seem particularly happy about having me around. My aunt was a slightly plump white woman who was absolutely wonderful at making desserts. Although I had to admit, her desserts were incredibly sweet. If I ate too much, I felt like I was going to get sick. Still, she was extremely enthusiastic. She was always trying new recipes and finding different ways to make treats for me. My uncle's daughter was already married to a Chinese-American man. Thanks to my cousin and brother-in-law, I could still enjoy plenty of familiar Chinese food. My uncle's son was only a year older than me. When he noticed that I was somewhat introverted and didn't talk much, he came over, patted me on the shoulder, and laughed. "Bro, with your height and build, all you need is a decent car and a little grooming. The girls will be all over you." Then he started taking me to all kinds of parties and social gatherings for young people. With him constantly dragging me around, I quickly became familiar with the local crowd and blended in with the other young people. When summer vacation ended, it was finally time to start university. Thanks to my uncle's connections, I was able to enroll directly at the university my cousin attended. I chose finance as my major. There was nothing particularly special about the choice. The experience I had gained in my previous life, combined with the assets I already possessed, gave me enough knowledge and resources to build a successful career. Chapter 11 Life in F Country turned out to be much warmer and more welcoming than I had expected. During holidays, I spent my time around the farm, helping with chores and enjoying the peaceful surroundings. At university, I attended classes alongside students from all over the world and spent my days working on assignments and studying. During my second year, after doing enough research and preparation, I decided to try my hand at international trade. I wanted to gain some real-world business experience. I discussed the idea with my uncle. He didn't discourage me. Instead, he asked, "Do you have enough money?" Then he offered to introduce me to several experienced business owners. Having a mentor would certainly have made things easier and saved me a lot of time. But I didn't think I needed to rely on someone else. For a beginner like me, making mistakes wasn't a bad thing. I was young, I had time, I had money, and most importantly, I had enough room to experiment and learn from my failures. So I teamed up with 3 of my classmates and invested in a small company. We began exporting clothing and food from F Country to neighboring countries. A year later, during my 3rd year of university, the company finally made a small profit. But by then, each of my classmates had developed different ambitions. Some wanted to make more money and eventually start businesses of their own. Others felt the profits were too unstable and decided they wanted out. In the end, we mutually agreed to dissolve the company. Even though the business had been small, it had taught me a great deal. I realized that if I owned my own factory and handled the products directly, I could potentially make much more money. So I came up with another plan. I conducted more research, studied the market carefully, and began preparing to start another business before graduation. During my free time, I also used some of the money I had earned to buy a car for my uncle. I bought an apartment near the university for myself as well, and my cousin eventually moved in with me. Before long, we had adopted a large number of stray cats. Some were healthy, others were disabled, but I took them all in. Whenever sunlight poured across the balcony, the furry little creatures would curl themselves into tiny balls and sleep peacefully at my feet. I would pet one, tease another, and simply watch them play around the apartment. And every time I did, I couldn't help thinking about my previous life. On our first wedding anniversary, I suddenly remembered that Willow and I had both always loved cats. On our wedding day, Willow had even told me that we should get a cat together someday. So I decided to surprise her. I bought a tiny Siamese kitten and brought it home. But the moment Lou father and Lou mother saw it, they immediately started complaining. They told me that our priority should now be preparing Willow for pregnancy. According to them, having a cat around could be harmful to a pregnant woman. The poor little Siamese kitten had no idea what it had done wrong. It simply curled up helplessly in my arms, looking so pitiful that I couldn't bear to let it go. In the end, I had no choice but to give it to a classmate who loved cats just as much as I did. I gave my classmate money to cover the kitten's expenses, bought plenty of food and supplies, and continued visiting the little cat regularly. Now, as I held a large, long-haired ginger cat in my arms, I suddenly realized something. Felt like I hadn't thought about Willow or the Lou family for a very long time. And that was a good thing. I was happy now. There was no reason to keep dragging those painful memories back into my mind. Chapter 12 During the second semester of my 3rd year at university, I started another company. This time, I decided to enter the dairy industry. I began with cattle farming and gradually expanded into dairy processing, slowly building and improving the entire industry chain. By the time I graduated, I had successfully established a complete production chain. That gave me a huge advantage. Because I controlled the process from the beginning to the end, I was able to reduce my costs dramatically. Whether it was my domestic business in F country or my export operations, I now had enough confidence to negotiate prices with business partners. Once everything had finally stabilized, I suggested returning to my home country for a visit. My uncle didn't stop me. My cousin decided to accompany me. But the moment we landed, someone suddenly covered my eyes from behind. A playful voice asked, "George, guess who I am?" I was speechless. It was none other than Monica, the beautiful Spanish woman who had become my business partner. She had been working with me since our university days and was the only one who had stayed by my side throughout all those years. She smiled and asked, "George, aren't you surprised?" I calmly replied, "Wasn't the plan to negotiate for the land? If you came all the way here with me, who's handling the negotiations?" Her bright eyes flashed with amusement. "In your heart, the company isn't as important as I am, right?" I couldn't help but answer, "Of course. Don't even think about playing the pity card." My cousin, who had been standing nearby watching everything, laughed. "She's just as beautiful as your secretary." Then, when Monica wasn't looking, he secretly gave her a thumbs up. "Go for it." Encouraged by him, Monica happily handed me the breakfast she had prepared herself. But just as she was about to give it to me, another tall figure suddenly appeared beside me. She stepped directly between us and casually handed me a lunchbox. Her hand was soft and delicate, like a young shoot, and her skin was smooth as porcelain. She thoughtfully pulled a wet wipe from her bag and offered to clean my hands. Then, in a sweet voice, she said, "The car is ready, boss." Anna had a sweet voice, but her appearance was surprisingly cold and elegant. I turned to look at her. Her delicate features immediately caught my attention. She stood directly in front of Monica, staring at me as though Monica wasn't even there. My secretary was becoming more and more possessive. I could only sigh before getting into the car. Chapter 13. A lot had changed back home. The first thing I did was visit my parents' graves and pay my respects. When I arrived, I noticed a dried bouquet of white chrysanthemums lying beside their tombstone, swaying gently in the wind. It was probably left there by one of my parents' old friends. I carefully moved the dried flowers aside and placed my own fresh bouquet in their place. Then I sat there and talked to my parents about everything that had happened in my life abroad. I told them how well my uncle had treated me. I told them how wonderful my aunt was at cooking, although I still complained about how ridiculously sweet her desserts were. I even told them about my sister and brother-in-law, who were struggling to keep up with taking care of their newborn baby. And when it came to me, I told them not to worry. Everything was going well. I had family to rely on now. I had graduated with excellent results. And along the way, I had met many talented people who shared my ambitions and interests in business. I smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm taking good care of myself." Then it started to rain. The rainwater ran down my face and eventually slipped into the corner of my mouth. Tasted strangely salty. After paying our respects, we slowly walked out of the cemetery. My cousin held an umbrella over Monica. Anna walked quietly beside me. Just as we passed a man and a woman, I noticed that the woman was carrying a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. The man walking behind her held an umbrella over her. Then he suddenly spoke in a sharp, irritated voice. "You could come here every single day and still not find George. You're carrying our child. Why can't you think about my feelings for once?" The voice sounded familiar, yet somehow it also felt strangely distant. I instinctively turned around, and there they were, Makoto and Willow. The moment my cousin and Monica heard my name, they both looked toward me. I quietly shook my head, signaling them not to react. Makoto continued talking. Then, without warning, Willow stopped walking. She turned around, grabbed the umbrella from Makoto's hand, and threw it onto the ground. "Can you just give me a break? You're really annoying." Makoto's face immediately turned furious. He stomped hard on the umbrella lying on the ground. The two of them looked ready to start arguing right there in front of my parents' graves. I didn't want their drama disturbing the place where my parents rested. So I quickly called over the cemetery staff and asked them to handle the situation. As for why I didn't reveal myself to Willow immediately, the reason was simple. I hadn't returned to my home country for her. I was far more interested in the current real estate market. If I was coming back to discuss business and explore new opportunities, I had no intention of getting dragged into Willow and Makoto's drama again. Chapter 14. Unfortunately, when I went back to visit the old house, I happened to run into one of my parents' old friends. He was an elder who had known both my parents and the Liu family for many years. The moment he saw me, he immediately called Liu mother and told her that I had returned. Liu mother sounded extremely excited. "George, you little rascal. Why didn't you tell me you were back? I've been so worried about you. Wait for me. I'll come and pick you up." I calmly interrupted her. "No need, madam. I have some other matters to take care of." Before she could say anything else, I hung up the phone myself. Then I returned the phone to the elder. By the time Liu mother and Willow arrived, my cousin, Monica, Anna, and I had already left for a hotel in the city. We were attending a banquet that evening. It was a valuable opportunity to meet several developers from City A and discuss possible business cooperation. The banquet was quite grand. We were already accustomed to drinking, making toasts, and socializing at business events in F country, so we quickly felt comfortable in this environment as well. Throughout the evening, I had several pleasant conversations with different business owners. Part of that was because of my own understanding and perspective when it came to business. The other reason was that some of these people had maintained a shallow connection with my parents in the past. Because I already had a network and knew how to handle business discussions, everything went remarkably smoothly. Halfway through the banquet, however, some commotion suddenly came from the entrance of the hall. The host, Martin, frowned and asked, "What's going on?" One of the staff members quickly answered, "Mr. Liu doesn't have an invitation, but he insists on coming inside." Martin glanced at me. He knew that I had once been adopted by the Liu family. After a moment, he smiled and said, "It's probably just a mistake. They must have forgotten to send an invitation to Mr. Liu. Please let him in." On the surface, I remained completely indifferent. But inside, I couldn't help finding it amusing. Forgot to send an invitation? That wasn't the real reason. They simply looked down on the Liu family's current financial situation. Without my financial support, the Liu family's small company would have struggled just to survive. In fact, because of several recent policy changes, their company was already standing on the edge of bankruptcy. Under those circumstances, who would still want to do business with the Liu family? Still, I didn't stop Martin from letting them inside. After all, the outsiders here didn't know the history between me and the Liu family. If people discovered that I had returned after being raised by the Liu family and was now refusing to help them, someone might accuse me of being ungrateful. That wouldn't look good for my reputation. So, outwardly, I continued to maintain appearances. Chapter 15. The moment Willow entered the hall, her eyes immediately locked onto me. She was wearing a high-end dress that looked slightly worn. It had become somewhat wrinkled after the recent scuffle, but she didn't bother fixing it. Instead, she hurried straight toward me. "George, you're finally back." Her eyes were filled with an eager light. Those once dull and lifeless eyes suddenly seemed to brighten. I didn't move. Just as Willow was about to reach me, 3 people immediately stepped in front of me. My cousin frowned and asked, "Who are you?" Monica put her hands on her hips. "Why is there another one?" Anna had just taken a sip of water. She pursed her lips and cleared her throat, looking ready to start scolding. I sighed. We were supposed to be serious business people. There was no reason for us to turn this into some ridiculous scene. Willow's eyes suddenly turned red. She looked at me and asked softly, "George, why?" I had no intention of reminiscing about the past with her. So I simply said, "It's been a long time. I still have things to take care of. You're free to do whatever you want." Liu mother was right behind Willow. Relying on her age and position, she shamelessly squeezed through the crowd and reached me. "George, you little rascal. Why did you just leave without saying a word? Where have you been all these years?" She grabbed my hand and began wiping away her tears. I expressionlessly pulled my hand away. Then I looked directly at her. "Madam, you received the letter my uncle sent you, didn't you?" Why didn't you tell me about it? Besides, I left a note before I left. The moment I said those two things, everyone in the room immediately understood that something was wrong. They were all sharp enough to put the pieces together. This wasn't about Lou Mother genuinely caring about me. She cared about the wealth I possessed. That much was obvious without me having to explain anything further. Lou Mother immediately stopped crying. She forced a smile and said, "George, don't be angry. How was I supposed to know whether that letter was a scam or not?" Then she quickly changed the subject. "By the way, after you left, Willow searched for you for a very long time. You two should sit down and catch up." As she said this, she forcibly pulled Willow over to my side. Willow didn't say anything. She simply stared at me with red, tearful eyes. Her gaze made me uncomfortable. I frowned. Seeing this, Anna immediately walked over and firmly told Willow to keep her distance from me. "Please keep your distance from my husband." I was speechless. Monica immediately snorted. "A guy who couldn't even win me over? You should give up already." Willow didn't even look at either of them. Her eyes remained fixed on me. Then she asked, "Why did you leave? Don't you know how long I searched for you?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I don't care to know. I'm not interested in knowing. And I don't want to know." Chapter 16. Willow's voice became choked with emotion. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the bracelet. "I fixed this for you. I came looking for you that day because I wanted to make things right. George, I promise I won't be foolish again." She spoke with such sincerity that tears began to shine in her eyes. Monica glanced at the bracelet. Then she covered her mouth and gave a faint, mocking smile. "Are you still in high school? What's this supposed to be? It's so cheap and childish." Chapter 16. Willow looked at me deeply. Her voice filled with a pitiful desperation. "I'll do anything you want. Just please don't ignore me." As for the gifts, I had never cared about their value. I didn't even care whether I liked them or not. In my previous life, when Willow gave me her beloved doll, I had been happy for a long time. It wasn't because the doll itself was special. I was happy simply because it had been given to me by the woman I loved. But now I no longer liked Willow. In fact, I couldn't even bring myself to waste the slightest bit of emotion on hating her. She was too weak. Once I set aside the emotions that had clouded my judgment in my previous life, I realized that Willow wasn't even worthy of being my opponent. I looked at her and said, "I still appreciate your rebellious nature. Your attempts to control me are actually quite amusing." Her voice became choked with emotion. "George, those were just words I said out of anger." She hurriedly tried to explain. "I thought." I waved my hand dismissively. "It doesn't matter." I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and said indifferently, "Does your husband know you're here to see me? Please don't waste my time with this. Okay?" Willow's lips trembled. My words had clearly shaken her. In my previous life, whenever I wanted to say even one more word to her, she would tell me not to disturb her because she was busy. She had her hair to do. She had shopping to finish. She had baking to take care of. But the truth was that she spent almost every night with Makoto, having children with him and living a carefree life. As I was about to leave, Willow suddenly panicked. "Please don't go. Let's start over, okay?" Before I could respond, my cousin spoke first. "Isn't your husband running around here trying to seduce my cousin? Who exactly is this woman?" Willow's face immediately turned pale. She trembled as she said, "I didn't mean to hide my marriage. George, I just wanted to win you back. Please don't be angry. I was tricked by Makoto. He drugged me, and that's how I made a mistake. All these years, I've kept myself for you." I almost wanted to laugh. Can we please not insult the phrase, "kept myself"? What exactly was there for me to be angry about? In the end, Lou Mother and Willow were escorted out by Martin. The banquet eventually ended, but Willow was still waiting outside, hoping to see me. Unexpectedly, Makoto arrived. The moment he saw her, he began punching and kicking her. He shouted angrily, "You're carrying my child, and you're still coming here to meet another man? How cheap can you be?" Pregnant women could be more emotionally sensitive, and Willow finally lost her temper. "Get away from me!" The two of them began arguing and fighting. In the end, Makoto, consumed by rage, threw a punch that knocked Willow to the ground. A crimson trail of blood began running down her leg. I turned my gaze away and got into the car. Even as the blood continued to flow, Willow kept screaming toward my car from a distance. She repeatedly shouted my name. My cousin looked at her in disbelief. "She really is obsessed. What a trashy woman." I corrected him calmly. "It's not obsession. She's trying to use our past to move me emotionally and make me help the Liu family. A woman like that only loves herself." Chapter 17. The business negotiations went extremely well. I would be co-investing with Martin and several others to develop the largest new shopping mall in a city. Because of the preliminary preparations and planning, I needed to remain in the country for a while. Monica returned first. Before she left, she couldn't stop nagging me. "There's an old saying in your country. A good horse doesn't eat the grass it has already passed. Don't make up with that guy. Also, that female secretary of yours is no good. Her voice is so soft. You can tell she's a pretentious coquette." Anna quietly walked over and said, "Boss, actually, I can do a dominatrix voice too." I rolled my eyes at both of them. "Right now, all I want to do is make money. If you two keep wasting my time, I'll fire you both." Monica immediately shot Anna an annoyed glare, huffed angrily, and boarded the plane. Anna, however, quietly adjusted her collar, seemingly trying to make her cleavage more noticeable. I was completely speechless. After Willow's miscarriage, she came looking for me several times. Eventually, however, she became too preoccupied with her own problems and stopped coming. The Ito family was utterly humiliated when they discovered that Willow had cheated while pregnant. They gathered together and came to a city, demanding an explanation from the Liu family. At that point, the Liu family's company was already struggling to survive. After being further stirred up by Makoto's relatives, they immediately declared bankruptcy. They even hired an excellent lawyer to help Makoto and Willow fight their divorce case. In the end, Makoto walked away with most of the Liu family's remaining assets. Liu's father was devastated by the bankruptcy. Unable to cope with everything that had happened, he eventually hanged himself at the company's old site. Liu's mother was shattered by the shock. She became mentally unstable and began wandering around, talking to the air and muttering to an imaginary son-in-law, "She's your wife." Chapter 17. Isn't it normal to spend money on your wife? Marrying an orphan like you was already a downgrade. You should at least put some effort into it. Later, Liu's mother ran into the street in a fit of anger, throwing a tantrum without caring about anything around her. She was struck by passing vehicles. The accident left her paralyzed and confined to a bed. Willow desperately begged Makoto for money to pay for her mother's medical treatment. But most of Makoto's money had already been handed over to his relatives, leaving him with almost nothing. On top of that, Makoto had always held a grudge against the Liu family, so he refused to help. The two of them started arguing again. This time, Willow blamed all of her misfortunes on Makoto. Makoto couldn't tolerate her accusations anymore. He lost control and beat her mercilessly. But neither of them knew that Willow had secretly brought a knife with her. In the next moment, she attacked him. The attack ultimately led to Makoto's death. Willow was arrested shortly afterward. Meanwhile, I went to the hospital to visit Liu's mother. I even paid for her medical expenses. Everyone praised me for being loyal and said that despite everything, I still cared about the family that had raised me. But they had no idea what I had actually done. I had deliberately hired the worst nurse I could find to take care of her. Before long, Liu's mother's body was covered in painful bed sores, and a terrible stench filled the room. I stood beside her bed with a faint smile. "Madam, you have memories from your past life too, don't you? When you tormented me back then, did you ever imagine that one day you'd end up completely in my hands? You knew Willow was seeing someone else, yet you still accused me of being incapable. While I was starving, taking medicine, and bowing my head every day, your family was enjoying a comfortable and luxurious life. You got to enjoy your happiness while I suffered. Now it's your turn to experience what I went through. Lu mother suddenly opened her eyes wide with rage. She desperately swung her arms, trying to hit me, but she couldn't even touch the sleeve of my clothes. All she could do was open her mouth helplessly as saliva dripped from her lips. Her eyes were filled with hatred and resentment. But I wasn't going to let her die. No, I would keep her alive, barely hanging on. Before Willow was executed, she requested to see me. I agreed. When she saw me, she immediately began crying. She confessed everything. She told me that her mind had suddenly been filled with memories that didn't belong to her. She had seen how her coldness and indifference toward me in her previous life had caused me to live such a lonely and miserable existence. Then she looked at me through her tears. Can you forgive me? I love you. I just never had the courage to face my true feelings. I wanted to escape from my parents' control. I had always listened to everything they told me to do. But when they ordered me to love you, I became angry and deliberately rebelled against them. How childish I was. Now I've lost everything. She broke down sobbing. I simply shook my head. Willow suddenly laughed bitterly at herself. It's okay. Hate me if you want. This life has been so miserable for me. Maybe this is my punishment. This time I couldn't help laughing. Punishment? How could it possibly be such a coincidence? My reflection appeared in the glass. Even I could see the faint excitement in my expression. I looked at Willow and continued, You think the downfall of your family's company was simply because of the changing business environment? You think Makoto discovered the location of that banquet by coincidence? You think it was really that easy for you to lose your child? You think Makoto's poor relatives somehow managed to find a top-notch legal team for him all by themselves? With every question, the color slowly drained from Willow's face. Soon she was completely pale, yet her eyes had turned bloodshot. She stared at me and asked, Do you really hate me that much? Why wouldn't I hate her? In my previous life, I had never done anything to intentionally hurt anyone. Yet I had lived a life that was worse than death. Why? Because the Lu family coveted my wealth. They took advantage of me, destroyed my future, and turned my entire life into a nightmare. In this life, I had only made a few small adjustments. And even then, I was already being merciful. Everything that happened to them was ultimately the result of choices they had made themselves. I slowly stood up. Then I gave Willow my final words. I'll let your mother know about your execution. I turned around and walked out of the prison. Once outside, I got into the car. The black sedan sped through the rain. Outside the window, the newly divided commercial district had already begun to take shape. Tall buildings were rising one after another, marking the beginning of a new era. And somewhere ahead of me was the future, a future that belonged to me,